Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hope everybody's okay today. Hopefully, you'll be watching this during class time. I'm wondering how many of you are going to be doing that. Um, but um, but yeah, so I just wanted to get on here and say a couple things to you about the play. Well, actually, this is more of a short story. Um, a short novel, maybe. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so here we go, right? Wednesday, about half of you hadn't started the play, so it was hard to kind of do too much. But what we pointed out on Wednesday was that we see immediately a sort of a separation between normal mores, normal sort of expectations of society, and particularly up against this particular character in Merceau. Um, we see that Merceau has a sort of a detachment, a sort of a coldness from emotions, right? Or at least he doesn't respond in a way that society would have us respond. If you're watching this and wasn't in class Wednesday, we read something from Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, that talked about the herd and so the mass of people and how individuals seem to get caught up in the masses, right? So, we know immediately already from background from the last couple of weeks the idea this is Camus, right? This is Camus. We're talking about absurdity. We're talking about a sort of a non-conventional look at the world, if you will, um, and this sense of alienness, right? The stranger, right? Alien, right? Camus has a line that says, "One is forever alien to the world," right? And so early on, right? Let's kind of move through it. Early on, we do part one today. We'll talk about that on Monday in class. Part two, we'll talk about Wednesday in class. There are assignments that I put on Moodle just now, quote assignments, just quotes. Actually, I have two assignments from Monday, but you'll see that on Moodle. One is just kind of I give you some things and ask you your general thoughts about the statements, and then the second one is more of a worksheet to work through part one, and then for Monday, and then to work through part two for Wednesday. Obviously, if you've read the whole play and you're comfortable, you can get that done this weekend, right? That kind of thing, right? So let's delve into part one, right? So part one, obviously, it opens up with the funeral, right? Um, but what Camus is, I'm just gonna kind of give you an analysis. You read the stuff, so let's just kind of analyze it a little bit. So what Camus is trying to kind of again show this separation between or detachment between him and the world, right? Between I mean between Meursault and the world, right? And so Camus kind of shows Meursault in the sense of it doesn't matter, the idea of social judgment, right, with the cigarettes, right? Should I give a cigarette to the caretaker? Maybe I shouldn't, but then who cares? It don't matter. Like she's dead, right? That kind of thing, right? And then he even makes a line in there saying, in the uh, talking about like funerals or home condolences, right? They don't mean anything, he says, right? And so, which is really radically different than us, right? Connor already talked about the idea of sentimentality and what representation looks like, right? And then those of us who pay our respects, right? So yeah, and then obviously the smoking thing, um, he says it doesn't mean anything or it doesn't matter or something like that. He says, and then he gives the cigarette anyway, right? Then you got like what's Thomas Perez, right? And um, you've probably heard the term foils in character, right? Perez is one of the first foils that we'll see. A foil is kind of like me against the world, like you against me, A against B, right? Or really A against not A kind of thing, right? It's kind of a view of the mirror and saying good cop, bad cop kind of thing, right? And so I think Thomas Perez, might be the kind of the first example that we see who Perez is and who Merceau ain't, kind of thing, right? Perez, right, is sad about his mother's. It's sad about Merceau's mother, right? Talk about the hot weather, right? This physicalness of hotness that'll come back up in this place, so pay attention to that. Uh, Camus' discussion of Merceau as being averse to heat, right? Um, which maybe at the end of the book we can kind of talk about maybe what that means to you. But Perez, kind of acts what we would think people would act, right? You grieve, you sad, and Merceau just don't do that, right? He just want to get out the hot sun, like, is this over yet, kind of thing, right? And then, so obviously, like I said, pay attention to the bright lights, to the sun, things like that. It's interesting because when we read Cat in the Hot Tin Roof later, no, when we read Streetcar Named Desire later on, that's gonna kind of come up too. So it's interesting. But yeah, um, so think of that as we kind of finish this book. This idea of the sun and the physical nature of things that affect Merceau, right? Um, you know, one thing I found about this with the early part of the book is when he wants to get out of the funeral as fast as he can and go to sleep, right? And just kind of like, as a writer, it's interesting. You're facing death, right? The ultimate, the deep sleep, right? And then he wants to go into sort of another kind of sleep, right? So it's like one is dead, and then one is kind of living dead, right? It's kind of a psychic or spiritual death, right? That you're going to wake up from and do it again, kind of thing, right? So it's really interesting. But yeah, so uh, just remember that. Then he moves on, right? And so really talking about meaninglessness or sort of a nonchalant kind of way of looking at the world, right? So after the funeral, what does he want to do? He want to go swimming, right? And so I almost forgot about my mama for a minute, right? I'm moving on with life. Like life goes on. Um, and so today I feel like swimming and, I kind of put my mama aside. Like she's gone, she's dead, right? Um, and so this idea of meaninglessness or just compartmentalization, you might want to say in a more charitable sense, but just saying I'm not going to be all, you know, I can't breathe, I can't eat, I can't do all that kind of stuff, right? You got to kind of move on according to Camus through the description of Merceau. He talks about the idea of everything kind of means the same, right? There's no higher, he talks about going swimming. He talks about uh, just normal people passing on the street, right? Um, he, you know, people from the soccer game or something he talks about, but nothing really has meaning. And like, it's just kind of like stuff just happening around me, right? So almost an everydayness, right? We talk about this everydayness um, in the piece I'm going to have us read maybe by next Friday. In Camus' his myth of Sisyphus, he says, Monday becomes Tuesday, Tuesday becomes Wednesday, Wednesday becomes Thursday, all according to the same rhythm, kind of stuff, right? Nothing is really different, right? And so, outside of Merceau's balcony, for the most part, he just don't get engaged in all that stuff, right? It's just, the mundane, if you will, right? And of course, you'll start seeing this element of Sundays, right? Because Sundays sort of, particularly sort of, it kind of bothers him a little bit, right? Because it takes him away from it. Sundays when you're resting, right? Takes you away from from the working. That takes you away from life, right? I'll repeat that. It's like sometimes you get caught up in your stuff or get caught up in the rhythm of your day that you get up, you eat, you go to calf, you go to class, blah blah blah, and you do it again Tuesday and do it again Wednesday, blah blah blah, and then the day you don't have to do it, right? For some of us, it's just I can sleep, but that's exactly the point, right? That it's absurd because it's like even if you're resting for a minute, you got to do it again Monday, right? So it's like for him, Sundays becomes problematic because now I have to pay attention to the fact that I really ain't got shit to do. At least Monday through Friday, I had stuff to do. Now it's like I ain't got nothing to do. So again, this meaninglessness in life, he says, right? And so, when he looks in the mirror, right? When he really looks in the mirror, and I don't even see my own reflection, right? This sort of this inability to acknowledge oneself, right, is another example of Camus in a philosophical sense says man is always alienated from himself, right? We'll remember that line when I read in Myth of Sisyphus, right? Man is always alienated from himself, right? So if you're writing that down, write it down. Man is always alienated from himself, right? So then you get introduced to Marie, right? Marie's on board. And again, this physicality, right? The swimming, the smoking, the sleeping, and then now you got, you know, maybe a Marie who comes to be the second foil, right? The second A versus not A, I versus not I kind of situation where, you know, he does kind of, I wouldn't say get sensitive emotionally, but he does kind of identify some sensations, right? Remember, he talks about the sky is in my eyes, right? And then Marie's heart beats softly, right? But you know, remember the sun, right, becomes a problem with him when he's with Marie, and and they get off the boat to go into the water, kind of thing, right? So again, it's interesting to just remember that those relationships to son, right? Raymond, Raymond, you also see Raymond in there in chapter one, right? In book one, part one, excuse me. I think this is more like chapter, I don't know, three, four, something like that. But I think with Raymond's character or introduction to the play, I think from my perspective, I think Camus kind of brings Raymond in to kind of say how how society kind of put importance on stuff that may not be, or impose meaning on stuff, right? I don't mean to be funny, but it's like it's my 16th birthday. I'm just like, well, I mean, that's just between 15 and 17. It's my 25th year at the job. Does it mean more than 24 or 26? Right? And so Raymond sort of, you know, Raymond is trying to put meaning onto Marceau, where Marceau always says there ain't none. But Raymond kind of looks at Marceau's behavior, his attitude as, you know, sort of as meaning something, and kind of he makes it almost feel like Raymond almost feels like Merceau actually cares about him. And I think we know this by now that Merceau really don't, right? Raymond sees him as a close friend, That's my homie, my boy. But we really know that to Merceau is just something to do, right? And we realize that Raymond was putting meaning into a relationship where there wasn't any, right? Which is why I said the other day that a couple of you I laughed about it. I mean, you know, don't tell me I love you unless I understand what you mean by love, right? Just because someone is in your presence don't mean they're there. You got that, right? Just because somebody is around you all the time don't mean they're connected. It just means they ain't got shit else to do, or you and them are doing the same thing. We guess we could do it together. Like it don't cost me nothing to do it, right? But let's not, like Raymond, put too much meaning into the person I go to lunch with every day, right? I mean, because at some point that's not going to happen, and if it's not going to happen, how are you going to feel about it, right? So just again, I'm just speaking as a Camus kind of response, right? Um, Salamando, uh, you know, comes in too, and I think him and Raymond both kind of shows the difference between them and Raymond. I mean, them and Rousseau. Um, Salamano and his dog, right? Um, and they, that's his real homie. Like Salamano and his dog are tight, right? And really emotional. You know, this sort of love, hate, fear relationship between master and dog, that kind of thing, right? Um, so this sense of loyalty comes into play. The sort of concept of loyalty comes into play in this play, and you see, so you got the dog and Salamando, you got Salamando, Raymond, Rousseau, all people thinking they got relationships and meaning and loyalty. And to Rousseau, like, I ain't really tied to nothing on me. I mean, I could pick up today and keep on moving and not think twice, right? But then you got Marie though, right? But I think we've learned in this first part that Marie, not that he uses Marie per se, maybe that's one way to look at it, but uses to use somebody in a utilitarian perspective means that you have a purpose to yield a certain end. And that end, well, maybe it is that way because he's just trying to yield sex, right? I mean, so maybe he is using Marie. But as opposed to what I think that's what I would ask you, right, to think about. You probably wouldn't be wrong to say that Merceau uses Marie. But I think the next question would be like, what is he using her for? Well, clearly her body. Well, if that's the case, what is Marie using him for? Right? Hope, aspirations of love, like that kind of thing, right? And so if that's the case, do people naturally use each other? Are all relationships kind of transactional in that sense, right? So just think about that. Um, there's a term I want you to write down if you haven't written it down. Nihilism, right? Nihil, Nihilism. Nihilism. Nihilism is the concept that nothing matters, right? Nihil, right? Or nil, nil means zero, right? Nihil, nil, nihil means nothing, right? And so nihilism or nihilistic as an adjective means this sort of feeling or engagement in nothing or nothing matters, right? Um, and so there's a sense to which, oh, so I want you to put that word nihilism, remember that. But then I think what we start seeing is sort of a nihilistic morality. Or maybe that may be an oxymoron, right? How can you be moral and nihilistic, right? So maybe it's a nihilistic amorality, right? A nihilistic amorality. And be amoral means what? It means you're not moral, right? It doesn't mean you're immoral. Immoral means you're going up against certain moral conditions and presuppositions, blah blah blah. But Amoral is sort of in a position that is non-existent. Morality doesn't exist. So if we think about Merceau as nihilistically amoral, then that's a different construction than looking at him as being bad. Think back to Nietzsche. Nietzsche, I told you, the piece we read from was the gay science, but it comes from. I mean, the one I also book I like from him is called Beyond Good and Evil. Right. So think of Merceau as having a nihilistic, amoral position. Right. So what are some examples of that? So think about like Raymond and the black woman, right? The Moorish woman, right? Most people would say, well, the way Raymond treated the sister was kind of not cool, like, or maybe immoral, certainly reprehensible. And then Raymond, what? He physically abuses his mistress, right? Um, Puts Merceau in a kind of violent kind of situation by having him write that letter, right? But then Merceau, like, it's strange. Like Merceau ain't like pissed off at dude. Like a lot of people were like, man, what the hell you got me involved in? Where Merceau, it's more like, man, I'll do this because it don't matter. Nihilistic amorality. One can commit an immoral act because they have no morality. They don't see it as immoral. They don't see it as bad. It's beyond bad or good or evil. Right? So watch how this plays out. If I see the world in a way that there is no good or bad, and my actions to you might look immoral, to me, it's just an action. And so, in that sense, I have a sort of an innocence, what Sartre would call a bad innocence, right? So I'm innocent of my wrongdoing. I'm innocent of my evil. I'm innocent of my quote unquote immorality because I don't view morality the same way as you do. Matter of fact, I don't even believe in right or wrong, right? So think about that. Right? Think about that. What else I want to say before I close this up? You know, toward the end of the first part is you can imagine it's kind of my favorite. Some folk in the room has been with me for a while. Could probably figure this out. Um, I know that Guille had my love and desire class, and you know, Cat and you, yeah. But anyway, I think there's a sense to which you and Mariah could speak to this. But so Marie and Marceau, they got a funny relationship, right? And it's funny to me. Now maybe it's not funny when you're like, man, I've loved somebody who refused to love me back, or I put more into a relationship that he or she gave me back, and stuff like that. And I get that. I get it ain't happy. But you remember when Marie asked Marceau, like, you know, can you can you can you what did he say? What she say? She said, "Are you able to tell me you love me or something like show me how you love me or something like that?" Well, he did. He was like, "I don't think so." I'm sorry. I think that's funny, right? Because imagine you sit up there at dinner, you sit up there with somebody you care about, and he was like, "So how can you tell me how much you love me, or tell me how what I mean to you?" You just want to hear some nice things, and they come back to you and say, "I don't think so." So again, it's like Marcel, just like that question don't mean nothing to him. I mean, It's just wild, right? And then look at like the backdrop of this, right? You see Raymond engaged in fights with his significant other. You see cheating going on. Marie's upset because of the violence around, and well, and she can't even eat, right? And what does Merceau do? He's well. It don't bother me. Again, the foil, the A and the not A, the I and the not I, right? Everybody's up against Merceau, and Merceau's up against everybody else, right? Um, Raymond, Merceau, Salamano, right? Salamano, right? Remember when he asked Merceau um, uh, about the dog. I forgot what he said. Dang it, I ain't got my book with me. Um, ah, but y'all remember, and maybe we could talk about it in class Monday. But maybe just remember is the idea that it's clear. No, it's clear, but we can kind of assume that Merceau, anyway, kind of admits, right? I don't love Marie, right? And in that sense, that he kind of shows, a sort of a character trait, right? A truthfulness, right? A truthfulness that very few of us engage in, right? When he or she asks you, "Do you love me?" Right? We worried about hurting feelings, social conventions. We worry about herds. What is my expectation to say back, right? If you were to say, "No, I don't love you back," but let's go back and let's go have some sex or let's go swimming, you're gonna look at dude or look at girl like she crazy. But yet we say we want the truth. And Merceau is giving us the truth, and some of us are looking at Merceau like, hold on, dude. Maybe it's true like the few good men. You can't handle the truth. Right? Just think about it this way. A lot of people would say they have, they have feelings of love, right? Even when they don't. And Merceau, Merceau tells you how it feels, how he feels. He gives you what he got, and he don't give you nothing more, nothing less. Right? Right? I don't know, maybe. Um, and then at the end of like the first part, we see he really ain't really got no motivation. So I really wanted to talk about this later, but I'll say this now and then close this lecture. Like when we look when we go to the next reading, the Iceman cometh. It's gonna be a big thing about like motivation and interest. And I think for Marceau, we see especially in the latter part of this first part that he really doesn't have like motivation or interests, right? Which again is consistent with right with what a detached and meaningless life, right? Right? He views lives as just a series of events that has no meaning or equally the sort of the equally have little importance. Um, he gave up his studies. He talked about right. He gave up school and just unfulfilled hopes, right? Just sort of with unfulfilled hopes, right? What comes next? Meaninglessness. Who cares? They don't care, right? And so this feeling kind of plays out with Marie a little bit, where Marie asks him to marry her. Right now, imagine this: like the sister know who he is, the sister know how he represents. The sister know he really don't give her what she needs, but she still loves this dude. She loves his honesty. She loves his forthright. But Marceau, I mean, you already know he ain't got no hope for nothing, so he can't have a hope for a long, happy marriage. But why not? It really because marriage has no meaning to him in the same way it has to her, right? And Marie even what calls him peculiar, strange, right? But maybe that's why she loves him. Maybe we love people we shouldn't love because they're just different. And I'm attracted to that even though that thing doesn't really make me safe, healthy. But we're clear that his honesty works for her. Right? He ain't playing no. He laying it down straight. But for some people, it alienates. Right. Right. And what is clear though, he's unable to make meaningful relationships. Right. So that should get us a little bit through part one. Think about that. What I've done is given you. We have two things that's due Monday, and it's in your Moodle right now. You have a questionnaire that I ask you to rank 1 to 5 how you feel about the quote or the point. And then you have some notes. You can write some notes in there because we can have that conversation when we start class. I'm curious about how you look at some of those stuff. Then we'll get into some of these points. I have a few quotes from part one that's in the document that I put in your Moodle as well. The document has part one and part two. So just do part one for Monday and then part two for Wednesday. Or obviously, if you just knock it out if you read the book and you're ready to knock it out. But we'll be talking about part one Monday and part two Wednesday. All right. Enjoy. Have a good weekend. Take care. Stay strong.